Okay.
Welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. This is so fun.
Oh, you're so welcome. I was like a little shy about it because it's something I've been wanting to do for a long time. But obviously, my platform is not about lupus. I do talk about it on my YouTube channel, but this is like primarily about astrology content. So I was like a little like shy about reaching out. But then finally, I was like, you know what? Let me just ask. Like she can always say no, and that will be the end of it. So I'm glad that you said yes.
No, I really appreciated it. I think it's awesome awareness. Like, this is what we have to do, right? Like, put ourselves out there, talk about it, and put a face to the disease. So I'm excited.
Or some of you know that I live with a chronic illness called lupus, and Talia does too. And Talia is also here on TikTok, and her channel is primarily about lupus. And I've been wanting to have this chat with her for a long time, so I'm glad we get to be here to talk about it. So I have some questions that I've written out that I wanted to, use as kind of like a way for us to guide the conversation. So I'm gonna go ahead and dive in so we can get started. So Talia, how long have you had lupus, or at what age were you diagnosed?
So I was diagnosed in 2004, and I was diagnosed when I was 16 years old. So that's a lot to process, right? I've spent my teenage years and my entire adult life up to this point, I'll be 36, with lupus, which is a lot. And that was
Wow.
when I was diagnosed. Yes. And I'm just gonna, my dog loves going out right when I'm talking, right? So excuse me if I'm up because dogs.
No worries at
Um,
all. I love those moments that make life real.
yeah, my kids aren't home, so
That always
a
helps.
little less real.
That seems to like demand the attention a little bit more, the kiddos, that is.
Yes. And so the one thing I will say, because I have my platform and I'll go live. I don't know if you want to, if we're doing back and forth, or if you have questions you want to go through and then I go through questions. I'll leave that up to you.
Yeah, we can do back and forth. Like if you have questions that you want to ask me as well, feel free to like ask. But I just wrote these out just so we had some sort of a framework. So, but I don't want you to feel like you're tied to them. I just want the conversation to flow because let me tell you what my intentions are. So, my intentions are to connect other people that are living with lupus with you and with everybody else. You're actually the first person I've ever invited onto my YouTube channel to talk about lupus, and hopefully you're the first of many. But I want other people that are living with the disease to know that there are people out there like you and like many others that are dedicating their platforms to having these conversations so that if they don't have actual people in their lives that they can talk to about this or where they feel seen, they know where to go. So that's really my intention. So whatever you feel would be helpful in making people feel welcome to, follow you and welcome to reach out, that's what this is about for me.
Great.
Okay. So you were saying you've been living with it for 20 years. Has the disease like stayed the same? Has it progressed? Like what has that been like in terms of like the severity of symptoms?
So when I was originally diagnosed, I kind of convinced myself, I'm like, they must have it wrong, right? They definitely have it wrong. There's no way I have this disease, especially because my lupus seemed stable for so long. It progressed over time. And when a few years ago, after 5 years ago, after the birth of my daughter, and then after the birth of my son, the disease definitely escalated. And at that point, I had to figure out what to do. Was my protocol that I was doing, was it worth staying the same, or did I have to introduce more medication? I was very scared of organ involvement, which is something that many of us face, and I wanted to stop the disease in its tracks before my organs were attacked, because that's really what it was going towards.
Wow. Yeah, I can definitely relate to some of that. I got diagnosed at the beginning of the pandemic, so I'm still very new to lupus, and that's why I'm so in awe of like everything that you're doing because you make me feel seen, and that is what inspired me to want to start this because you know, yeah, we all have loved ones who like love us and support us, but it's very different to hear someone's experience be almost identical to yours, especially when they also have other comorbid conditions that are similar to yours. So at the beginning of the pandemic is when I received my diagnosis, and a year into that, I had some organ involvement. So in addition to having lupus, now I'm also dealing with kidney disease. So I have lupus nephritis, which is, lupus essentially affecting my kidneys. So that I know very well what you mean about that. And that was very frightening for me to go from first getting used to the idea of having lupus, especially being someone that was super healthy, no health issues whatsoever. I had like a thyroid issue with, and then I limited gluten from my diet, and that solved it. So I've never really dealt with any like health issues. I've always been healthy. I'm running, working out. So that kind of knocked me on my face. So then for the kidney issues to start shortly after, it was very traumatic for me. Very, very traumatic. So I know what you mean about that fear.
How long before the pandemic were you dealing with some of those symptoms?
I would say it was a few months. I was very lucky in the sense that it didn't take very long for the doctors to figure out what was going on. It was just a few months. As I mentioned before, I never had any health issues. Like I never even got like headaches or stomach aches. Like I was super healthy. Then all of a sudden I started getting like colds, like back to back, and like flu-like symptoms back to back. And it seemed like I was getting all sorts of weird things. I even got pink eye one time. Um, so yeah, it was just a bunch of like little symptoms for like a few months. So then finally my primary care doctor sent me to go see a rheumatoid doctor, which is an endocrinologist, and that's when that came about.
Yeah. I woke up one day, you mentioned being so healthy.
I woke up one day. I woke up one day. I sorry about the echo. I don't know what we need to do about that. Let me try muting and unmuting. All right, we fixed it.
Yay. So you mentioned being really healthy, and that was the thing about me. I was so healthy. There was nothing wrong. I'm 16, I wake up and I'm like, I'm gonna go on a run. And the next day I woke up with what felt like the flu or something viral. And
Hmm.
from that point forward, it was just, I was very ill. I was dealing with low grade fevers, extreme joint pain, fatigue, very similar to what people experience when they have the flu. And there were no answers for it. It took me about a year and a half to
Whoa.
actually, yeah, so it's interesting. You're saying, wow, like a year and a half to get my diagnosis, it is a long time. The average time to get a lupus diagnosis is 6 years from the onset of symptoms.
Wow.
So that's really fascinating. Like, I feel lucky that I was diagnosed in a year and a half when you realize that
Hmm.
people that for 6 years know something is wrong and there's absolutely no answer.
Can you imagine what that's like to be made to feel crazy for 6 years or 7 years?
Sometimes when you have a chronic illness, there's so much going on that even though I have my diagnosis, new issues constantly come up.
Hmm.
So this year, I have something going on with my body, and I go to the doctor, and they're like, well, it could just be your lupus. And I feel a lot of times like I get medically gaslit on that end where everything gets blamed on my lupus, where I had pneumonia and they sent me home and told me it was my lupus, and it wasn't. It was pneumonia. I wound up in the hospital.
Oh,
So
goodness.
that's like another piece of it that I've had to deal with, recognizing that things can be my lupus, but I could also be sick in other ways as well. And it's
Yeah.
not always my lupus.
Yes. Yeah, as I'm listening to you say that, it almost sounds like they're making it seem like you have like a scarlet letter or something. Like, oh, L for lupus. So everything else is, well, we know what this is.
Made like a new TikTok post for me. Yeah, it's the scarlet letter, the big red L that I, and that's frustrating. Like I don't like going to doctor's appointments where I have to lead with that because I'm scared that that will be what I'm told. Like, oh, it's just your lupus when it isn't. I've dealt with a lot of health issues. You mentioned that there are a lot of comorbid issues. And I now have Hashimoto's. I have other diseases as well where
Hmm.
I like even dealing, I have ADHD, but
Same.
things were blamed on my brain fog. When really, like maybe it is brain fog, which is a symptom of lupus. But what if that was my ADHD and it
Yep.
wasn't brain fog? And my late diagnosis for that was constantly, it was, it's just your lupus.
Yep. That's terrible. I have to say, like speaking of comorbid condition, I think having lupus has exacerbated my mental health symptoms in general. I've always like struggled with anxiety since, it runs in my family and I've learned how to like maximize it to my advantage. It's actually helped me be very driven in my life, the anxiety, and obviously I've had ADHD since I was a kid, undiagnosed. But since the lupus, it's been my experience that the anxiety then became like unmanageable for me, and it deteriorated much much further. And then my cognition and processing and memory ability also deteriorated, and that's what led me to actually go see a psychiatrist, which resulted in the ADHD diagnosis. Going back into like my symptoms from childhood, which is kind of ironic because I am a mental health professional and I have done assessments on people and I have given people, a diagnosis of ADHD, but I couldn't see it in myself until I was willing to actually see myself as a patient and go be at the mercy of somebody else who could objectively look at me and say, yeah, you've been like this since you were a kid. This is not something new. It's just the lupus now eroded like whatever buffer I had. So now I was like raw.
That's fascinating. I relate to that. A lot of us suffer with anxiety and depression, and
Hmm.
it's very typical. And I always wonder, it's like the chicken and egg situation. Was I anxious? Was I dealing with depression? Or do I deal with an unpredictable chronic illness and those things become exacerbated as a result? And so, yes, I am anxious to go on trips, but is it because I'm an anxious person, or is it because when you have a chronic illness and you're living in cycles of the unpredictability of that, where you every day is unpredictable, but well,
Yep.
that makes it that much more anxiety inducing. And then you have to miss a trip because your health is awful, or you go on the trip and the things don't go according to plan, and now you are depressed.
Yep.
And so is it that I suffer from anxiety and depression, or is it that I am a person who now deals with those things as a result?
Yep. Like if you were to take any reasonable human being and give them the life that we have in terms of what we deal with on a daily basis, uh, would they not be anxious or depressed?
Yeah, I would assume that many of us would really struggle, and many of us do. And you mentioned like these things, these coping mechanisms that we constantly have. And I can imagine that getting the diagnosis and then navigating the doctor's appointments and figuring things out, we almost lose our ability to cope at that point. It's really, really hard to navigate that. And then it's all those strategies we put in place, it becomes so much more difficult to keep them up when we're managing chronic illness as well.
Yep.
So let
And
me ask you, how do
mhm,
you manage your chronic illness? Like, how do you juggle that with your mental health? Like, what are tools you use?
therapy. Therapy is huge. Therapy is paramount. I'm somebody who's a huge advocate for therapy, and I'm probably going to be in therapy until I die. I firmly believe in having somebody who is not connected to me give me an objective view of like what they're seeing, and the big part of therapy for me is picking the right person, somebody I trust. And once I trust them, I know they're going to tell me what's real and what's not real, because a lot of times with chronic illness came from me well, you could blame it on my Capricorn stellium or you could blame it on lupus, but I've always been a realist. As an Aquarius rising, I've always been a realist, but I think since lupus I've gotten a little bit more dark than I was before. And I just need somebody to tell me like if the darkness has gotten to be too much. Like what is my default level darkness? And then like what is like outside of that range. And I need somebody to monitor that for me. So that's important. The other thing is I really prioritize my mental health. I have excellent boundaries now compared to before lupus. I don't entertain anything that causes me emotional distress if I can. Like the stuff that I can eliminate, I'm quick to eliminate it. And I really prioritize like slowing down, like taking time to have a bath, taking time to read, taking time to journal. Like these things that make me feel grounded. I also meditate regularly. Like every day I meditate, sometimes several times a day. All those things really help me stay grounded. But yeah, I feel like I'm constantly in a state of emotional instability inside.
Yeah, I also am a big advocate for therapy. I started when I realized that it's not typical to deal with a chronic illness with no cure. And I recognized, why am I not seeking any kind of help for this? Like, I need to navigate this.
Yep.
And because I was diagnosed in 2004, like, I'm really grateful for how far we've come as a society,
Yeah.
because the stigma attached to seeking out therapy, like when you said, I have a therapist in 2004, it was a very different cultural attitude than today. Like today, I think people are so much more open, yet there still is the stigma.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been invaluable to me to have therapy. I have therapy at this point. I go bi-weekly because, excuse me, I don't know, did I say that right? I go every other week. I used to go once a week because going to therapy once a week, not having the time, was putting mental health pressures on me on that angle.
Yes.
Time for it was making me feel stressed.
Yeah.
But it really is invaluable. But the difficult thing there is I recognize the privilege in having access to that. And it's so unfortunate that it can't be something that everyone can have access to.
Absolutely. You said it. I am so aware of my privilege when I think about managing lupus because just even the expenses alone of the doctor's visits, like once it gets stabilized, those diminish in terms of frequency. But in the beginning, I remember like going like every month, and it's like you're seeing all these different doctors. And like when my kidneys got involved, it's like you're seeing your primary care doctor, then you're seeing your lupus doctor, then you're seeing your kidney doctor, and never mind like, and then your psychiatrist. Like it's a lot like to manage that on a monthly basis, and you still have other shit going on. It's not like you have nothing else to do. And I don't know about you, but like where I live, you have to drive to the appointment. There's traffic. It's like the whole visit takes like 3 hours out of your day, and you're doing like 4 or 5 of those. It's a lot. Like that in and of itself is emotionally taxing.
All of that. And so that's why, like, asking how do you manage it? Like, I am constantly coming back to that. Like, I love to meditate, but I find myself, and I think this is also ADHD, where I'm like, oh man, I forgot to do that. Right? Where it's like my intention is to do it because I know it grounds me.
Yeah.
That's something that's so important to me, like finding things that ground me, or like almost having mantras for myself, like, this is hard. Look at how much you overcome. Like reminding myself, being kind to myself. Like, you have a chronic illness. There are things that are more difficult for you, and that's okay. That doesn't mean you're a bad person or you're a failure because of it. And
Exactly.
yeah, like sometimes I felt so much guilt associated. Like, why, like setting those boundaries. You mentioned boundaries. Saying no to people, like I can't
Yeah.
do it. And then feeling the guilt, like, oh, well, other people would do it. Well, you're not other people. And that's been
Hmm.
like adjusting my frame of mind has been so healthy for me, but always coming back to that.
I love that. I love that. You're speaking everything you're saying like resonates with me so much. So let's get a little bit more concrete. Like, do you have any, so we already talked about the mental health piece, but do you have any like wellness routines that help you with managing your lupus, like food, like exercise, like that type of thing, like lifestyle type stuff?
So people are big believers that lifestyle adjustments, food and working out, we know that that's important, making conscious choices. I am really conscientious about my sleep patterns and making sure that I'm getting enough sleep and I'm making sure I'm getting enough rest. one of the most challenging things for me is recognizing that if I have a packed day, that not to overdo it. Like friends want to go out to dinner, I have to say, look, my work day was really long on Friday, let's do Saturday. And then
Yeah.
unfortunately, Saturday morning becomes me resting because I know I have planned Saturday night. And it's difficult. Like, I'm not saying that that's something that I enjoy having to make those changes to my life, but that's how I preserve my health. I do work out regularly. I know that's not something that's in all of our abilities, but it's
Mhm.
one of the things I do and I enjoy. I am mindful of what I eat and what I put in my body, but I will never say to somebody, you should do the autoimmune protocol diet. You should do what this doctor says. You should
Mhm.
do yoga. I think we have to remember that we're all so different in what works for us.
Mhm.
So instead, it's like, here's my toolkit. Here are the things I have tried. Maybe they'll work for you, maybe they won't. I am very triggered by stress. I know that is like probably my number one trigger. So for
Same.
so if I know that, then how I focus on managing my levels of stress. So I
Exactly.
find your own personal triggers and almost go from there.
I love that idea. So make it more personalized. Identify what causes you the most, distress or symptoms, and then tackle that first, as opposed to trying to chew into something else or a big picture.
Yeah, so I'm really sensitive to not telling people like, oh, if you cut out, and look, nightshades are something that is very triggering for people and
Hmm.
inflammatory, a lot of us, but I would never say to someone, cut out nightshades, you'll feel better. I'd say,
Yeah.
hey, these are inflammatory, I'm mindful of them, and then take it or leave it, right?
Yep.
Figure out what works for you as an individual. Like, know what things are. Like, look, if you're gonna drink a ton and never get rest, well, that wouldn't be good for anyone. Anyone would struggle with that. Now add the
Yeah.
fact that you're chronically ill. Yeah, it's definitely gonna be rough on you.
Absolutely. Somebody else said the sun takes them out. I want to see who it was. It was Rocky Adams, 123. Yeah, for some people, a big trigger for their symptoms is the sun, just being exposed to the sun. And Rocky, I'm there with you too. So for me, my top three are definitely the sun, stress, and sleep disturbances.
Hmm?
Those are my top three.
I would say those are my top three as well. Yeah, those are my top three. And I live in a beach town. And in case you can't tell, I'm like a shade darker than Casper the Friendly Ghost. So it doesn't work out for me. And yesterday I went to the beach and it was super overcast out. But what people forget is that a gray sky doesn't mean there isn't UV. Like you still have to.
Exactly.
And then I'm a teacher. I let my students play kickball today, and we were outside they're high schoolers. We were outside for 2 periods playing kickball, and then I'm sitting there like, oh my gosh, what did I do? Right? Like I'll pay for that. It's tricky, but how does
Yeah.
it affect you?
Yeah, with the sun, like if honestly, I think the one area of guilt is like playing with my kiddo, as you brought up kids, because like kiddos want to be outside. They want to run wild outside, and like the fact that I have to like think about, how do I enter the sun? Like if it's gonna be midday, how do I like redirect to like why don't we wait until sunset or before the sun goes up? And do I bring an umbrella? And it's, that is the one part of lupus that still causes me emotional distress, like how it makes me have to kind of suppress my desire to like be free outside. I have to now plan it and micromanage it, and it kind of takes the fun out of it. And I know it's like a cognitive thing that I have to get over myself mentally because it is what it is. Like I'm not going to change my reality to have another life. Um, this is my destiny. I have to like figure it out, but it's still something that I struggle with because like how do you control for exposure to the sun? It's such a natural part of life. You know what I mean? Do you have any of that with your own kiddos?
Yeah, you like a lot of what you said just spoke to me. Just this idea of like these things that are almost our destiny. Like a quote that I just always say, it is what it is. Like, what am I going to do with that? Right? Like,
Yep.
This is what it is. And, it's funny. You mentioned like you're rising. I'm like, is this the Sagittarius in me? Like, I don't know, right? I'm always like,
Oh,
is
yeah,
it,
Sagittarius loves freedom.
and right. And I'm like, but I'm also so practical on so many levels. And that you mentioned, like with having kids, it just brings up those feelings of guilt. But I come back
Yes.
to these mantras of, and I'm thinking also, like I'm getting my ADHD, right? I'm thinking of my therapist said to me about things being your teacher. And I was dealing with like a personal relationship struggle. And she's like, people come into your life as their teachers. This person can drive you nuts. They are your teacher. And I'm like, they're not my teacher. And she's like, yes, they are. So can I like treat Lupus as my teacher? And
I love that.
like, I want to be like, no, it's such a jerk. It controls my life. But what has it done for me? If I'm creating this silver lining, like, how has it affected me in ways that are my teacher? And I do feel like it does.
I'm gonna cry, like, because a lot of like my healing has taken me to exactly to this place. And like I'm trying to keep myself together because I think it's like a place that I arrived to myself, like I would say like 6 months ago, in like understanding that there is a blessing in it that I spent a lot of time like not being willing to see or resisting. Because when I think about the quality of my life now, in terms of like my ability to like take care of myself and prioritize myself and my needs and my health and truly feel responsible for myself as opposed to like defaulting to everyone else's needs and not taking responsibility and blaming other people when eventually I'm unhappy because I'm actually like not being a leader and I'm being passive aggressive. So lupus has like eliminated a lot of the bullshit type behaviors that I used to have that cause my own like that would lead to my own like undoing. And it's something I will forever be grateful for. So for you, what have been some of like the gifts that lupus has given you? And I can share some of mine before I put you on the spot. My boundaries now are stellar. They did not used to be very good. Taking care of myself now, I actually have a routine that I love and that works really well for me and that keeps me grounded. This is actually the most emotionally steady I've ever felt in my entire life. I don't consume like alcohol and stuff like that. So I'm like of sound mind like all the time. And it's like at the end of this stressful day, I don't like run to a glass of wine to like, pick up my mood or whatever. So lupus has taught me like how to really care for myself without depending on something or someone to take care of me. And it's just really made me more appreciative of life in general. I think like being aware of my own mortality has given me like a deeper appreciation for human life and for the importance of like healing and forgiveness and humility.
Okay, you took all of mine. No. Um,
You can still talk about it. I want to hear all that you think.
So I would say for one, my boundaries. And it's still something I'm working on. I think part of that is just being a younger person. It's something that you're learning.
Mhm.
And when I was diagnosed at 16, there's just so much that I still want to work through personally because shame and guilt are so intertwined.
Mhm.
And those feelings bubble up big time with chronic illness. And because I was so young, I know that's impacted me. So I
Mhm.
want to work on that personally. But now in my 30s, right? I'll be 36 this year.
Mhm.
Boundaries, I've been really working on so hard these last few years. And I'm proud of the growth I found. And that comes from chronic illness. Like I am better at boundaries, like looking at my husband and saying, "Hey, I can't do this." And it was so hard for me after the birth of my son. I was really struggling. And I also at that point had a toddler. I had a 2-year-old. So the middle
Mhm.
of the night feeds, the middle of the night changes. The moms I know that sacrifice, that are up all night with the baby, husband sleeping soundly.
Yeah.
And I needed him. Like I needed him to be like step up, be present. And he was like, I had to set that as a boundary. Like, you need to be an equal partner, if not more
Mhm.
sometimes. Um, that's really helped me like advocate for myself, find my voice, and recognize like I need to take care of me. Like I think of like the airplane, put your mask on first.
Yes.
Like, look, I need to take care of myself. I'm gonna, when we hang up, I'm gonna check a yoga schedule. Like, I want to take a nice yoga class tonight. Like, I need to ground myself.
Yes.
Compassion, I compassion is my number two. I think I'm a better person than I would have been. Like, no one ever knows what my sign is when they meet me. I think that's funny. I bring it up to you because whenever I'm like, people don't guess. Like, I'm a Scorpio and no one ever knows it.
I
And
would not I would not have guessed, but I was
no one,
sensing watery. I would have guessed Pisces.
I'm a Pisces moon.
That's what I picked up on.
Um, but I'm a Scorpio and I I just like it's so interesting like the level of compassion I have like I just wouldn't peg me for being a Scorpio with like my
Yeah.
energy or my attitude. Like I give people the benefit of the doubt. Like I think to myself, I don't know their story. I don't know what they're going through. They're like whatever I'm feeling, like, oh, if I start feeling like, oh, they don't like me or they had a bad attitude, it's not about me. I don't know what they're going through. Maybe they're going
Exactly.
through a diagnosis with lupus. Like I've been there. Like I don't know. It just I think it makes me a better human than I would have been. And then my third thing you said, it's the appreciation for life. I I fight hard to live the way I live. Like that's why I think a lot of us get frustrated when people are like, "Oh, you just have to do this and you'll be good." We have like, come on, I don't inject myself with medication every week because I like it.
Exactly.
Like I love living. Like I will fight so hard to have a good quality of life. And I just value it that much more. Like a blue sky, the green grass.
Yes.
I love it. I like value life so much.
Yes. And you know what's special about that? Whether we realize it or not, we are passing that on to our kiddos, where they're watching us be humans that appreciate the simple things. Like the other day, I was thinking about it. My kiddo went outside and she's like, "Oh, the sky is so beautiful and the sun is out." And I'm thinking, that sounds like me. And the only reason why, it's so ingrained in her is because that's me. Like I value so much of it in ways that I didn't really appreciate before. So even in the midst of our pain, there's still something good that we got from it and that we're sharing with others, which I think is kind of magical.
I was thinking, I was like, I have to ask you how, I'm like, if I'm talking to you about lupus, I have to ask you, like, how do you think so much knowledge about astrology and your sign, do you think that affected your diagnosis and the way you processed it? Because you're like, oh, well, I am this, and therefore I feel like this way about it. Like, do you think your sign affects how you feel about your diagnosis?
No, not necessarily. But what I will say is that my disease got me deeper into my spirituality. And astrology for me is part of my spirituality. It's a spiritual tool that I use to understand myself deeper and the world. And, understanding my natal chart even more has allowed me to develop more of an understanding for my trials and tribulations and how I navigate them. I see this as just like part of my destiny. I see this as part of my journey, and I know there's a blessing in it for me. And I know it's not just like pain, but not to go too deep into it. But in astrology, there are some zodiac signs that are karmic, meaning that they deliver karma, and this is why they go through a lot of suffering, because they have karma that they themselves need to absorb. And then they also give other people their karma when other people are not being fair or kind or good or whatever, when people need to be rebalanced. And my disease has helped me understand like how I am a karmic astrologic, speaking about my astrology natal chart. So me going through trauma is very normal for my life story. When I look at my entire life, it's been filled with a whole lot of trauma, all different types. So and I've always been open about that and okay working through that in therapy. But I think lupus has made me like reach deeper into it and finding my voice about it, like being able to publicly speak about it. And I think astrology is a great tool to do that. So if you're somebody who has a lot of Scorpio and Capricorn and Aquarius in your chart, chances are you are going to have a lot of trauma. And there's been a lot of scientific research out there that shows a strong connection between trauma and autoimmune illnesses. So to me, it's all one big piece of information.
It's fascinating. And I remember talking to my therapist, and she said, like, trauma and chronic illness are so linked. And that was almost like hard to hear because I know personally, like, I really struggle with placing blame on anything, like what caused my chronic illness
Mm-hmm.
and brought it out, especially
Mm-hmm.
something like lupus, because there are so many causes.
Mm-hmm.
There are triggers for it or things that definitely bring it out. And I'm like, of course, like trauma, lupus, Scorpio, like, come on, can't it just be easy?
I think that's why I'm so sarcastic, to be honest, is because I'm like, yeah, whatever. You know what I mean? Like a lot of life is shit and a lot of it is gray, and I'm not gonna like put on my rose-colored glasses about any of it. Like I'm just gonna say how I feel. I think before lupus, I used to swallow a lot of that pain and make it seem kosher, and because I'm someone that really used to value like practicality, productivity, being steady, emotionally steady. I have a lot of Capricorn in my chart, so I'm very like driven, I'm very resourceful, I'm very mature, responsible, all of the right stuff. And since lupus, I no longer feel like I have to like subscribe to any kind of like aspirations of myself. Like I just let it hang. Like whatever it is what it is. Like I'm no longer aspiring to be, you know what I mean? Because it's like I've been through a lot of very difficult situations in life that I haven't really talked about in general. And yes, I have like sought therapy before lupus, but since lupus, I feel like it's kind of gotten me even looser around some of that. So I'm a lot more comfortable now talking about my vulnerability, which is another blessing that's come out of it.
I am like that too. I felt like the unpredictability of the disease, it forces you to let go. And
Mhm.
I like control.
Same.
And um, is astrology real? I like control. And that is something that is so difficult when you're a person who really likes controlling situations. And if is that lupus being my teacher, right? Like,
Yep.
because when you get a chronic illness, there's no control.
None.
What a teacher. What a way. Like, I've become a lot more spontaneous out of the fact that I don't have a choice.
Yes.
I kind of have to be. Like, I have to kind of vibe in the moment of like the controlling person in me has to give in and let go and recognize that things will be as they will be. And
Yep.
that's just the universe kind of just handing it to you.
Yep. And there's freedom in that. That's the other piece.
There
Like I
is.
used to think that the only freedom was in me controlling it to whatever outcome I wanted to get to. But now letting go, like makes me feel much more free. Like even this stuff that I'm doing, I feel like I've really fully let go because I used to have so much shame and embarrassment about admitting to the fact that I even believed in astrology because, again, I went to school, I got a master's, I diagnosed people, I know I've participated in research studies, I've written research articles, like a medical model. I can tell you all the scientific facts about mental health, and I used to suffer a lot of like shame and embarrassment around like being judged around that because there's no scientific, credibility to any of it. It's just like spirituality, like woo woo witchy stuff. And it's like I've even let go of that. That was huge. Like it's like I'm at a point in my evolution where I absolutely do not give a shit anymore. And I like that for me.
Love that. That's like you've reached a next level. And it's interesting because I attribute a lot of that to lupus, but also like getting my ADHD diagnosis. My
Mhm.
husband said to me, he's like, "You're so much more ADHD since getting your diagnosis." And I'm like, I'm just not like I'm just not masking in the way that I always was. Like now
Yes.
it's like the shame and guilt of why I was like feeling impulsive or like high, like holding things back. I don't have to
Yes.
do that. I like now I know what it's coming from, right? And so I'm
Yes.
my authentic self. And with having the lupus diagnosis too, I'm just so at a point, I agree with you, where I'm just gonna be myself. And through that, being more vulnerable, I find myself being more authentic. I'm at
Yeah.
such a better level of peace than
Yes.
people are that don't deal with chronic illness, right? Like we're all in pain and we're all suffering for different
Yep.
reasons.
Mm-hmm. Yep. But
Yeah,
when you're living with a chronic illness, you can't run away from it. So you kind of have to face the music every day. So it makes you have to get real. And that is the beauty that comes with, being free is that you're real all the time. Because even if you want to fake the funk, your joints are gonna remind you, your temperature is gonna remind you, your hair falling out is gonna remind you, you're gonna get like a little nudge, like, no, bitch, this is not real. You need to step into reality and get it together.
I'm definitely someone where right now we're talking and I'm feeling like I feel good. Like I do not feel my lupus symptoms right now.
Mm-hmm.
If you ask me though, on a day where I'm in a flare, I will be like laying in bed, like, why is this my life? This is awful. Like I have, like I have such a
I
good
love it.
I have such a good attitude and perspective when I'm not in a flare. When I'm in a flare, I have to be like, it's going to be okay. You will come out of this. Um,
Yeah, because
I
it's
definitely,
depressing.
yeah, I can like right now I could see all the blessings of it, but let me tell you, when I'm in a flare, I am a miserable. Like, just why is this my life? It's
It's hard.
like
And
lupus.
it's okay to go back and forth. I do too. But, I think earlier I said I was getting teary-eyed is because I honestly never thought that I could see anything good. I think that's what really like touched my heart about it. Like I never thought that I could derive anything of meaning from all of this bullshit because it's so much bullshit. And the fact that I could even see one was like overwhelming to me. It just speaks to like how great the human spirit is. Like I didn't even know I had it in me. And that doesn't mean that tomorrow I can't be like, this is all bullshit. But the fact that I had that moment is kind of amazing to me because I'm quite a pessimist.
I always say I'm a realist. Like I don't feel like I'm a pessimist with things, but like my realism to some can definitely come across as pessimism
Hmm.
because I'm like, well, I have this chronic illness and it could kill me, but maybe it won't. Like people are like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine." Uh, like I guess it could sound like pessimism, but like I do believe though, like, and I would not consider myself Buddhist, but I love a lot of the principles and just a lot of the ideas which I see in so many spiritual beliefs, including things like concepts like karma and so many of these beliefs where I come back to this idea of human suffering and how we do all suffer, and
Yep.
that's how you find compassion on some level. Like
Yep.
I like, okay, I have lupus and other people don't. Like, there could be people in this live right now that do not have lupus. They've never experienced it, but they have felt what it is to suffer as a human. And
Yep.
there, through that, they have compassion. They
Yep.
can find that. And I just like, I need to put one foot in front of another because this is my life. This is the cards I was dealt. And the amount of things in my life, yes, lupus has taken a lot from me. I don't diminish that. I like to talk about that. I like to be real. But the blessings in my life are things other people just don't have. So
Absolutely.
I have to find that balance too.
Absolutely. And to your point, the pessimism, I think lupus has made me realize how pessimistic I am, and that's why I go to therapy because my natural inclination is to expect like the worst. The spiritual work that I do is to keep a neutral mind. It's not even to be positive, it's to keep a neutral mind so that I'm available for whatever may come. I'm very good at manifesting positive things in my life, but lupus definitely took me down a really dark path. And I think it's made me like find peace with my darkness. So to make you feel better about like the little dark thought that you shared with me, one of my rebuttal to that is, yeah, it may not be the lupus. I may just get hit by a bus, you know?
Right?
You know?
I know. Like, is this, yeah, and my brain is like, you're right. Like that makes sense.
Like it doesn't have to be lupus. Like I could be just, lupus could be fine. It could just be a bus that does me in the end. Like who's to say? Like no one knows what the future holds. And that is the craziness about life, that it's like any wonderful thing can happen in life and any terrible thing can happen. And just like being spiritually aligned is being able to live on that in this space where you recognize it's all life, like all of it, like the goodness and the shit that scares us. It's all life.
Like really so much of it is about how we approach and tackle it, which I don't know about you. Like you mentioned, you're semi newly diagnosed, right? You've been living with it now for years.
Yeah.
But the way the community affects me, like since getting on TikTok, and I just feel like there's so much finding community and finding people that I appreciate. It brings me peace. Like when people comment and say things like, yes, I understand that, or it resonates, I just feel so much less alone in the disease. And that helps me also.
So can you please talk about that? And please, like, can you tell the people where they can go follow your account for dealing with chronic illness and chronic disease as we're wrapping up here? I just want you to like get an opportunity to tell them explicitly how to connect with you. And then I want you to talk a little bit about, how you decided to start that journey for yourself. And I know it's been helpful, but I just want to hear like what your thought process has been like leaning into it.
So my name on here, my name is Talia, but you can find me as Peace Love Lupus, and which started. It was such a joke of a name, like like those people that are like Peace Love Life, and it was like a joke to me, and now I can't come back from it.
I love it.
How do you explain that to people? Like I look like such a basic, right? Like she's like blonde, whatever. That's what you find
You're
me.
hilarious.
Um, and what's the next part of your question?
So how did you decide to like start a TikTok exclusively about this kind of content?
So years ago, and if you have lupus, you can find in your area possibly ways to get involved. And I found one in my community with the Lupus Foundation of America, and I trained to be an ambassador for them. So they would call me when necessary. I've done panels where I've been a patient to speak on panels, whether it was like New York Presbyterian, for example, talking to patients, doctors, families. I've done events at schools. And then it's like the power of social media. I'm like, let me just create a TikTok and I'll post here and there. And, it's been slow and steady. I don't have a big following, and I work, I'm a mom, I'm tired, but I love advocacy. I love posting. I'm a teacher, like that's my job. And so this is an extension of that. And it just like, it really brings me happiness to share and to advocate and to connect with people, because I like people. I like connecting with humans. And so that's how
Oh.
I found myself here.
I
Yeah.
love it. Thank you so much for the space that you create. I don't remember the first video I ever saw by you, but I remember feeling immediately hooked, and I was like, because you share your life in such a candid, sometimes sarcastic, but also like very balanced kind of way. You're not dogmatic about like, this is the right way, this is the only way. There's like a lot of like, this is just what I'm doing. And sometimes even I fell at the thing I'm doing, but hey, such is life. I love like that whole take. It's so heartwarming. So for those of you who have lupus or living with chronic illness, strongly encourage you to go check her out, because you're gonna get hooked like I did.
Now I feel bad that I haven't posted in a while, but like I swear that's part of it too, right? Like we talk about preserving ourselves and our energy. And so if I take a step back, it's not that I don't love it. It's just, I just need that at this moment.
Of
So,
course.
that's how it goes. But thank you so much for inviting me onto a
Oh.
live. Like, I feel really special.
Oh, you should. You're pretty badass. You should.
I
And
like,
I feel so honored that you agree, honestly, from the bottom of my heart. You're the first, hopefully, of many people, because I want my YouTube account to be a place where people can go and have their chronic illness normalized, both in the public sphere and personally. So people like you that are doing the work, I want them to know like there's a place you can go and feel seen today. So thank you for agreeing to be that first person for my channel.
So much fun talking to you also because like we write to each other and like we'll comment on each other's things and I
Yeah.
love astrology. So I'm like I'm a I'm a Scorpio sun, a Pisces moon, and a Sag rising. Like, but I love getting to talk to you. I love your energy. Please, like we have to do this again.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I would definitely love to have you again, hands down. No questions asked.
Thank
Could
you.
relate. Go and follow Talia's account. And Talia, I look forward to having you again. Thank you so much. It was really, the pleasure was all mine.
Um,
All right. Bye bye.